Hello and welcome to the programme. This week we'll be examining corporation tax, the future of Scotland's universities and colleges, and just how the Scottish Government wants to improve the nation's mental health. Joining us today we have Neil Bibby for the Labour Party and Stewart Maxwell for the SNP. A warm welcome to you both. Neil Bibby, a number of economists suggested that devolving corporation tax would be a good thing. What's the Labour Party position on this?
I think the SNP have failed to make a compelling case for devolving and slashing corporation tax. Corporation tax cut would result in a massive black hole in the Scottish Government's finances.
We haven't argued for a cut in corporation tax. The Scottish Government's paper is about devolving the power, not about what that power would then be used for. That's up to individual parties to bring forward their ideas.
I believe there's been comments talked about 20% cut in corporation tax. We don't believe there should be, if there's a devolving and cut in corporation tax, it would leave a massive black hole in the Scottish Government's finances.
Itself, should the Scottish Parliament have the power to decide either way to raise or cut the tax?
I think there's a danger that we could have a race to the bottom on corporation tax if you have different parts of the UK devolving, having separate rates of corporation tax. There would be a race to the bottom. Everyone would reduce their corporation tax rates, and there would be no one's public finances would benefit. What I would say as well is that the idea that cutting corporation tax stimulates economic growth is one that is also not compelling as well, because Ireland has a corporation tax corporation tax rate of 12.5%. Iceland and Greece have lower corporation tax rates than the UK does at present, and the UK is a much stronger economy than Ireland, Iceland or Greece.
So you wouldn't be concerned if, for instance, Northern Ireland, and this is a possibility, they could have the devolution to them of corporation tax. They would be able to set tax according to whatever their criteria is. Would you not be concerned that that would give them a competitive advantage against what Scotland could do?
I think the danger with cutting corporation tax is that if you have a situation where there's different rates in different parts of the UK, there could be a race to the bottom, and any competitive advantages that was sought wouldn't be realised. What the SQUC have said is if there's lower corporation tax rates, you might have a situation where of profit shifting, where companies move their headquarters or move their accounts to Scotland, but don't actually move the economic activity and the jobs that go with that.
You were shaking your head.
No, because the experts who came before the committee on Tuesday said that that's a fairly simple problem to resolve in terms of allocating corporation tax, in terms of the number of employees who effectively are in England or in Scotland. So you can effectively deal with the idea of profit shifting quite simply. But the fact is that Neil here is concentrating on the idea that about cutting corporation tax. The Scottish Government paper doesn't talk about cutting corporation tax. It's about the power, having the power to devolve corporation tax to Scotland, so that individual governments, whether they be SNP governments, Labour governments or whatever government, can then decide what's best for the Scottish economy. Now that seems to me the right way to think about it. And secondly, on his point about a race to the bottom, it's a nice soundbite, but there is no international evidence whatsoever from other economies, Spain, Switzerland, the USA, Canada, who have got devolved corporation tax. There is no race to the bottom in any of these countries or in any others who have got devolved tax regimes. So frankly, it's a bit of a nonsense to say there'll be a race to the bottom, because the experts who came before the committee says, again, there is no evidence internationally for such a thing to happen.
There'll be a very quick reaction.
I think if the SNP want to devolve corporation tax, then they should say what the rate's going to be. I think it's unfair for them to actually have a debate unless they're actually going to, set out the case and actually what they're going to do with that corporation tax. The idea that business leaders are united in favour of the corporation tax isn't true as well. The CBI and the Scottish Chamber of Commerce have raised concerns about the devolving of corporation tax, and quite frankly, if the business community aren't united in favour of cutting corporation tax, neither am I.
CBI are in favour of devolving corporation tax in Northern Ireland, though, which is interesting.
Unfortunately, we're out of time on that piece. Let's move to our second item, which is yesterday's Scottish Government debate on mental health. There seemed to be some confusion in the Chamber yesterday about whether or not the number of people taking antidepressants is actually rising. What was your take on that from what you heard?
Well, first of all, mental health is a very important issue, and mental health problems can have a devastating impact on people's lives. It is concerning to hear reports of 1 in 10 people being reliant on antidepressant drugs. I think what's important is we should avoid stigmatising people that take those drugs. They can, help people. They can be a crutch for people to get through their lives on a daily basis. I think what we want to see is a greater focus on better working relationships between health sector a focus on alternative therapies, and a focus on early intervention around mental health. I've also seen reports of around 130,000 children, for example, suffering from mental health problems, and half of young people who leave care suffering from mental health conditions. If we can address mental health problems in childhood, I think it's less likely they will develop chronic conditions in adulthood.
The Labour Party amendment, Neil Bibby's party, yesterday put forward an amendment saying that local mental health services should be protected from any cuts, but the SNP didn't support that amendment. Why not?
Well, I think you have to take a much broader view about health strategy and health spending. I think the Labour Party, unfortunately, yet again, will focus on one point and say that must be protected, and then move on to the next point and say that must be protected, and that must be protected, and the next thing must be protected.
So local services shouldn't be protected?
No, of course they should be protected, but the point here is that the UK government has cut the Scottish Government budget by £1.3 billion this year alone. It'll be over £3 billion over the next 3 years. There have to be some tough decisions taken. Now, the fact is that all parts of the Scottish budget are under pressure, but the health budget has been protected in terms of its share of spending going forward in the budget. So health budget spending has been protected. Over the last 3 years, we've had a very good and very welcome strategy that has had some real success, some real progress over the last few years, and the consultation on the new strategy, I think, is also very welcome.
Neil Bibby, what do you make of the overall proposals from the government?
Well, can I just respond to that point first? I mean, I think the SNP made two very clear commitments at the election. One was to keep health services local, and the other one was to protect NHS spending. Now, Stewart said that the NHS spending is being protected. To health boards, I believe, is the situation. But as Jackie Bailey said in the debate on the budget last week, there's actually figures from Spice, so there's a 323 million real terms cut in the health budget. So I think there's a distinction between the two. Can I say generally on the point about the Scottish Government strategy, we welcome that. It was in the debate yesterday. Michael Matheson offered to meet with Labour colleagues and members of all parties to discuss the best way forward, and we'll certainly take that opportunity to discuss it. We welcome the strategy, however we want to see a proactive role for positive mental health in the community and in the workplace. Another report I saw that was concerning was that RCN, the Royal College of Nursing, suggested that 75% of their nurses believe that stress had increased in the workplace. So I think there needs to be a role for a focus on improving mental health in the community and in the workplace as part of that strategy.
OK, let's move on to our final item, which is this week's Education Committee. Neil Bibby, why shouldn't the government explore all options?
Well, first of all, can I say I believe we agree with Lord Sutherland in the way that this situation has been handled. It couldn't have been handled in a worse way. We often talk about having a respect agenda between the Scottish Government and the UK Government. I think we need to have a bit of a respect agenda within Scotland as well, and if we're going to propose mergers or potential mergers between Aberdeen and Dundee, then that should be done in a down the table.
The position is it's not a foregone conclusion that this merger will happen. Surely they're just exploring all options.
But the First Minister was given the opportunity to rule out a merger last week and refused to do so. And
what he was asked by your leader was about closures, and he made very clear that there would be no closures. That's what he was asked. He wasn't asked about mergers.
We oppose the merger of Aberdeen Dundee University, and the First Minister had the opportunity, or still has the opportunity to rule out a merger between Dundee and Aberdeen universities. And we take that position, and if the First Minister and the Cabinet Secretary agree with us, then they should make representations to the Scottish Funding Council, rather than having the Scottish Funding Council doing the work for us.
Well, it's the Funding Council's responsibility. I mean, the Education Secretary nor the First Minister has any legal power to force mergers on any institution. They're independent institutions. But the Funding Council is taking its job quite seriously and suggesting that the institutions look at the situation at this particular time and decide what's the best way forward. That's an entirely reasonable position, and I'm sorry that the Labour Party has gone down this scaremongering route in terms of trying to force headlines and misinformation on the general public. I think that's very unfortunate. It's quite clear that mergers between institutions have worked very well in some places, and if the Labour Party's position is actually they're opposed to the mergers even if those institutions wish to merge, that seems a rather bizarre situation.
Is that the position, Neil Bibby?
This situation has been handled very badly, and if the government and the Funding Council want to have a proper discussion about mergers, then you should have a proper discussion and actually involve people and have that debate rather than just sending faxes to universities, giving them 5 weeks to.
The 5 weeks is a complete red herring. There is no 5 weeks to decide that you must merge within 5 weeks. That's nonsense. And again, I say, surely it's right and proper that institutions should discuss these issues. We're in a tight financial settlement from the UK government, and they should, given the opportunity of a vacancy in principle, they should discuss merger, they should discuss options about sharing services, they should discuss whether or not they want to merge or don't want to merge. These are perfectly reasonable discussions to have, and I'm sorry that your party's trying to politicise this.
I think the views of the students and staff at each of the universities should be heard, and you know, I absolutely would agree with that, but I don't think the way this has been approached has been one in which that has been encouraged.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. Neil Bibby, Stewart Maxwell, thank you both for coming on the programme. This issue will obviously develop, and stay tuned to Holyrood Highlights to find out just what happens. And we'll be back next Thursday, and we'll be examining fuel poverty. Thanks for watching.